Hey guys, it's Jim Bounds with Co-op Motorworks and Motorhome Rehab Ranch over on Patreon. And should be a pretty interesting video for you. It's about FiTech. It's about fuel injection. Look, I was in fuel injection back 10 years ago and I gave up. It was so complicated and so many little wires and so much stuff. I said, no, Mr. Carburetor is going to be for me. But the guys won me over, okay? And I tell you, the industry has made it as close to a do-it-yourself thing as they can possibly do, I swear, man. You're not cutting wires and splicing stuff and taping things. Oh, no, it's all plug-in. So watch this video. And at the end of it, I'll talk about a few other things, but watch how Jason talks about this new technology. This is something we need to put in our motorhomes, okay? All right, come on with me. Let's go out and let's talk to Jason.
Hey guys, I'm Jason Stryker with Motorhome Rehab Ranch and Cooperative Motorworks. Today I'm going to talk about the FiTech fuel injection system and how we do the initial setup and just like, installation, I guess. First thing you can see right here, this is probably not the throttle body that you have on your coach or you're going to be installing. This is the 600 horsepower unit. It is also capable of doing power adders. We haven't actually installed this one on anything yet because we haven't needed that. We haven't been running nitrous or superchargers or anything. This engine was slated for a supercharger, so that's why we have this one, but it's in the perfect spot for me to show how we set it up. And it has all the features that any of the lower models, like the ones that we've been using, have. So it does look a little different, but it's almost identical in every way. It just has a couple extra wires. So first thing we're talking about is mounting it, like just the total installation. So this is replacing a carburetor. You can see it obviously goes in the same spot that a carburetor goes. However, this is square bore instead of spread bore. So it's going to take an adapter plate if you have the original intake manifold for either the 403 or the 455. So if you have the cast iron low rise intake manifold, then you're going to need this adapter plate. We do sell the kits together with everything depending on what model you have. So you can see it's got all the bolts and everything. This is an Edelbrock Performer intake manifold that I have on this engine right now. So this is already adapted to this throttle body so we can stick it straight on. That's why I don't have the spacer plate underneath. This one does stick up slightly higher, so floor modifications would have to be made, or like this coach was slated to have a body lift, so that would probably cover it. All right, so once we get the throttle body actually installed on here, pretty simple. It's just bolted down. There's a few wiring harnesses on it that come with it. I'm going to go over each one a little bit individually. That way you can see what stuff you're dealing with. So I'm just going to grab each one individually. So here we've got this 2 wires coming off. Goes to a little plug. This is going to go to the coolant temp sensor, which I normally put in this port right here, which would normally be where your Christmas tree is. So you can take the Christmas tree out. That's gone. If you don't know what that is, Jim's got a video coming up on that, so that'll explain that. You'd still have a port over here for your normal coolant temp sensor. This one happens to have 2 spots open for it. So, depending on what intake manifold you have, you would have a different layout possibly. So you may only have 2 ports for coolant temp sensors. One thing to note is we always run the intake manifold block off plates on these. You can see this one. Well, you may not be able to see it, but it does have block off plates inside there. So if you don't know about that, we have other videos that cover that. So next set of wires, let me see what we got here. We've got the controller wires. So that's just 2 plugs here. This goes to the control unit, This is the latest control unit that they're selling. There is a previous model that's a little not as fancy. So that just plugs in, easy. That's for the power. You can see it's turned on because I have it wired a little bit. And then it's just got this audio jack looking thing. That's for your data. So that plugs in, no problem. All right, and come over here. We have this wiring harness you probably won't have unless you have the 600 unit. This one handles the nitrous, and it also has the second fan controller. The normal unit, the 400 or the classic 550 that you'd likely run, does have the capability of running one set of fans. So you can set it digitally to what the temperature is going to be when those kick on. All right, next little bundle of wires we got here. I'm going to be very careful with this because I already wired it. It's got actually two kind of in the same spot. This bigger wire here with the orange and the red, that is going to be, the red one says bat, so that goes straight to the battery. You don't want that on a switch or anything. You want that directly to the battery, always getting voltage all the time so that it doesn't lose the memory when you shut the key off. The other one on this is this orange wire. It says pump. This goes to your fuel pump. If you're running the force fuel, which is what we recommend, which looks like this guy, you've got a battery positive right there. That's what the orange wire is going to go to. And then this one over here goes to a ground wire. That will run the fuel pump for this. You'll still need to have fuel plumbed to this unit. And I'll talk a little, well, I'll continue on this unit right now. When we're running the force fuel like this red port here, it's a 6AN. It comes with adapters that look like this. And it's going to have some fuel hose that's going to run up to this port on the driver's side of the throttle body. If you're running the force fuel, the port on the passenger side is going to get plugged off instead of having a return line. If you're running a high pressure pump and you're not running the force fuel, then this side will have another fitting already installed on it that will have fuel returned to the fuel tank. The other two ports on this, you've got one as inlet and one as return. It doesn't matter which one of these is which. The only thing that matters is that the highest one of these is the fuel return back to the tank. So we talk about fuel tanks and stuff like that in some of the other videos, but we'll be happy to talk more on that if you need us to. All right. Continuing with the wiring, we've got this little bundle right here. The ones that are important here is you've got the blue tack wire, and you've got a white wire, which you can see I have hooked up to this little gator clip. The white wire says key. You can kind of see it right there. So key, and then you can see the tack. I think I just disconnected one of them, so that'll affect later. I'll have to hook that back up. Those go where we normally run them is right here on the HEI distributor. You can see right here it says tack on one side and bat on the other side. Bat is going to be an ignition hot wire. So when you turn the key on, that's going to trigger that wire. It's going to give you power to your coil. The tack wire, that's for the tachometer. That's how it knows how fast the engine's turning over. If you don't have that hooked up, the engine will not run on fuel injection because it doesn't know that it's actually turning over. So this little wire right here, you probably will not have. This is for ignition controlling. So if you were to run like a MSD ignition module, this is going to tell it when to, advance and everything like that. Not something we recommend, but it is something that is a possibility of this unit. All right, back to this wiring harness, we can see there is a yellow wire here that says fan 1. That's a negative trigger wire. So when it hits the operating temperature that you set for the parameters, that will tell a relay to kick on the fans that you have associated with that. We use a 2-speed fan controller unit that we hooked that into, and it has 3 relays that are all set up, and we talk about that in another video. So if you need help with that, give us a call. We'll talk about it. This black wire here is coil on this one. So this one would normally not be coil. It's because it's the 600 unit. Normally there is an AC wire on that harness. They moved the AC wire to this other bundle. So that's going to be this AC in. I believe it is still black on the 400 and 550 units. What that does is if that goes up to your wire on your AC compressor, when that goes live telling it that the AC compressor is kicked on because you've turned your AC on, it tells the engine to throttle up in accordance with that. So it doesn't lug down whenever the AC compressor kicks on. Gives you, I don't know, maybe another 50 RPM or something like that. So, but it'll still tune. If it's tuned properly, you can run it without that wire and it shouldn't have any issues. All right, next bundle you have right here is your O2 sensor. I have that plugged in, and you can see down here where we normally install those. And you want them pointed down so that they're not collecting water. You don't want them, you can have them kind of off to the side. You just don't want it at like the lowest point because you don't want it filling with water. All right, so we already talked about the fuel inlet. Another thing we have over here is the throttle bracket. So with these brackets, if you're running the original intake manifold, this part right here may hit, and so sometimes that has to be cut off or bent in. This one you can see it was bent in slightly to clear, but we normally just cut it right at this seam right here. This is unused in our application. Your throttle cables are going to go on up here. So this linkage right here does have a tiny little clip on the back of it, little cotter key. That every once in a while when you're tuning them out, you may have to disconnect that. It's rare. I've only had a couple instances where I had to do that just because it was too much change between the front and rear butterflies for tuning it out. Right here, I'm going to show you, there is, this is one of the adjustment screws for setting the idle air control. This one actually sets more of the throttle position sensor. So this is for the front butterflies. I typically just turn that one clockwise in until it hits like 0.5 on the throttle position sensor, and then I back it back out until it's at 0, and then I start tuning with the other set, which is on this throttle body right back here. So this is the screw to set your idle air control. The idle air control is going to be set once it reaches operating temperature of 170 degrees or higher. So until this engine is 170 degrees, you can't fully tune it. It doesn't learn unless it's over 170 degrees. You can see a couple of vacuum ports here. So we've got some smaller vacuum ports, and then we've got the larger ones. So we got 2 of the 3/8 and a couple of, 1/4 inch or 5/16 or 3/16. There's also one up front. All right, I'm gonna see if I can get the controller to kick on now. I'm gonna find my white wire here. Okay, you can see once, this would be the equivalent of turning the ignition on. This lights up. Normally, if you have the fuel pump and everything wired up, what it's going to do when you first kick on that key is it's going to trigger the fuel pump, and it's going to pressurize that up to about 60 psi, like 57 psi of fuel pressure. and then you'll get a small burst of fuel down the throttle body. It'll all around this ring, in each of these, it'll squirt fuel at kind of like a diagonal pattern. So you'll see that burst. If one of those isn't shooting a burst of fuel for a second, then that injector may be clogged. A way to check it again is sometimes I'll cycle the key off, cycle the key back on, and you'll get the little burst of fuel. I'll try to get a video of that afterwards on a throttle body that we've already set up. That way you can see what that looks like. All right, now going into the control unit. You want to come around and, okay. So once we have it installed, everything's hooked up how it's supposed to be, we want to do the initial tuning. So we're going to scroll down to EFI, go EFI initial setup. This thing is touchscreen, but I don't really like to use the touchscreen. So I use the little joystick. So first menu item is engine setup. They may have them a little bit out of, or in a different order for the different ones. This one I know has a couple other items on this first list, or actually maybe not on the first list. Well, it does have fan 2 setup, so that wouldn't be on the other throttle bodies. But we're going to go to engine setup. So it's already set to 8 cylinders, so that's good. For the engine cubic inch, whoops, we're going to go back to that. Cubic inch, we're going to set that to whatever we have. So I'm going to edit that, clear 455, and then I'm going to hit OK. And now after any change that we make, we want to send to ECU. So we sent to ECU, it's accepted that, we can go on to the next item. For the cam, typically on this, it's going to be set to 1. That has to do with your vacuum. If you have different cam, some performance cam, you may need to set that to something else, but pretty much every one of them that we're running is going to be set to cam 1. We're going to send that to ECU. Rev limit, this is kind of up to you, but I usually set this to 5,000. So clear 5,000. Okay, send to ECU. And then we go to idle RPM warm. I typically set that to 750. So you can see if you just scroll over, you can go down by increments of 10. You may find that you want yours to idle a little higher than that, but that's typically what we set these to. So we send to ECU. I typically leave the fuel pump at the 74.9. And this one you probably won't have the tack or 2-wire coil. If you do have the setup that we have and you're running the HEI, then you want to leave it as tack. The other one would have to do with this 2-wire setup. So now I like to go back, and then I like to go back in and just see if it kept all the parameters. It may be a good idea to turn the key off and let everything, well, to know if it zeroed out, I usually go to dashboard, and you can see parameters here. If I take away just the key, then it'll zero everything out. I don't know if I can do that without, there we go. It takes a couple seconds, and there we go. Everything's zeroed out. It's still hooked up to the main battery, so it's going to save everything, but it's, you know, at this point, the throttle body's shut off. So now if I turn the key back on, which I'm going to set this down for a second so I can do that. Okay. We'll see if I lost my stuff. I may have disconnected the main power, but we will check. So I'm going to go to EFI initial setup, check it one more time. So I still have all my parameters, 8, 455, 1, 5,000, 750. So everything is looking good there. What I normally do at this point is I go back here. I would start the engine up at this point. If it has any hesitation starting, you can give it 50% throttle and it'll give it an extra burst of fuel. and that can kind of bypass if it's out of tune. Like if it's not tuned well enough to run at this point, that just dumps a whole bunch of extra fuel, and it should make it run well enough that you can get it to idle once you slowly let off the throttle. I typically don't have to do that. Almost every time that I've done these and set up everything properly, I can just turn it over and it starts and it idles rough, but does idle. If your timing is not already set up at this point, you want to have your timing set up before you get to the full tuning, because obviously you don't want it running with the timing off by a lot. But once the timing's done and you have it up to operating temperature, then we can go over what the idle air control is. I'm going to do that as another video just because we're getting a little long on this video. And so I'll talk about how to do the idle air control. I'll actually try to do that on a running engine if possible. All right.
Hey guys, so what'd you think about that, huh? I'm telling you, it's not, I mean, this shows you that, look, the wires, I mean, do you see all this, the loom on there and everything? Everything's plug in. I mean, it's, you know, it's just so much simpler. And it's almost like they said, Bubba and Scooter kept yelling because their 750 double pumper kept loading up. And they say, here, Bubba, put this on and shut up. Because it just works, man. It's what we got to do. So look, this gives you an introduction. If you want to go more, call me. We're FiTech dealers. They call us, say, listen, man, you guys got to be dealers because you're putting in so many of these. You got to do this. I mean, you got to think about it, man. Maybe next year or whatever, but it's coming. It's here now. Not coming. It's here now. Jesus. So look, thanks for watching, you ranch hands, and you want to be ranch hands. All right. Thanks, and thanks for the support. And we're going to do some more. Onward and to infinity and beyond. See you later. Bye-bye.